outside of this one church town, there's a gold dirt road to a whole lot of nothing. Got a deed to the land.
Thank you all for coming. Many of you already know, but my name is Harriet Cordelia. I am the current president of the S.T.C.H.S board and the volunteer for S.T.C.H.S for I don't know how many years, a long time. It's a wonderful organization. I've got a bunch of wonderful, would my board members please stand up? Just wave your hands. Welcoming tonight, we're welcoming Beth Pratt, who is a wildlife expert. That she has co-authored a book with Rob Hirsch, our local wonderful photographer, that'll be coming out, published by the Yosemite Conservancy in the first part of the year.
I was actually talking.
Cool. And she brought some pretty copies with you.
It is not out until next fall, so I have to wait, sorry.
Have some at the museum?
We will have them at the museum. We have Rob's other book there as well. I am giving to our wonderful guest, Beth, we're giving her a signed autograph copy of the Groveland Big Oak Flat book that was written by two of our illustrious folks, compiled with a lot of effort from a lot of people, and we thank you for coming.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, everybody. I actually, I've been a resident of Mid-Pines for over 25 years, right over the hill. But once I moved there, I never come up on train engines anymore. So it was nice to revisit. When I moved to California in '91, I lived in Stockton for a few years, and Groveland was where I stayed, as a Hotel Charlotte, or North Moon had drinks. So it was nice to come back here. I actually haven't been back this way since I attended a friend's wedding at Rob's house 10 years ago now. So thanks for welcoming me. It's nice to be on the other side of the hill. And thank you also to Harriet and S.T.C.H.S and also Bob, who I met through, I think just online at first, but we actually did some hikes together. So, yeah, Sierra Club. So thanks for also being here. But yeah, I am very passionate about wildlife. I have since I was a little girl. I really thank my parents. My dad is actually in the audience, who we go whale watching on Cape Cod. I actually grew up in Massachusetts, but when I moved to California in 1991, I fell in love with the Sierra. Robert Redford once said Yosemite claimed me, and I never looked back. I do miss good Boston pizza once in a while, but other than that, I just love it. And I worked in Yosemite National Park for a decade, worked in Yellowstone National Park for 4 years, but currently I am the California Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation and work on a lot of statewide projects, one of which I'll talk about. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my connectivity work, because I know Bob and Harriet or at least talk about the wildlife crossing. Some of you may have read about it in the news. But most of this talk is going to focus on Rob Hirsch and I'll talk about it. He's doing the photographs, and I was so thrilled when I asked him if he would do the photographs for a book that I've been wanting to write my whole adult life, which is obviously wildlife. I'll talk about that. And then I'm really just going to show you lots of really cool wildlife videos and photos and tell you stories of some wildlife you've seen here, or may not have seen, or may not have known existed here. I learned a lot writing this book. And then we will have time for questions, and happy to answer questions also. I mean, I could do a whole talk on coexisting with wildlife, but I'm really not going to get into that. But I'm happy to answer questions on that topic. But let's start. And I was very excited to have an opportunity to wear my Pica sweatshirt tonight. So, for those of you who follow me on social media, it is no mystery. Pica is my all-time favorite critter. But yeah, I kind of exist in these two worlds. And if you had told me 15 years ago, after I just come back from Yellowstone, I worked there for 4 years. My whole life has been national parks. I'd also be working in LA, advocating for improving the dating lives of cougars, the actual cougars, not the housewives of LA. I would have laughed at you, like, there's wildlife there? So it's been this really wildful existence, and now I spend almost full time. I do some work in Yosemite stuff, but really looking at how to improve urban wildlife conservation, which may sound like to many an oxymoron, but it really isn't. And again, I'm not going to get into too many conservation issues. I could do a whole, talk on biodiversity collapse and climate disruption and how our wildlife is suffering, but we're going to usually do the good news tonight. But our peopled spaces, including rural, suburban, are essential for wildlife these days, especially cities, because the #1 threat to wildlife is the loss of habitat. And they need habitat in order to survive in this new age and all the other challenges they face. So our cities and our peopled spaces are becoming increasingly important. We got to figure it out. That dominant view of wildlife needs to be here, and people need to be here, and never the two shall meet, doesn't work. We have to figure it out. And that's about all bad news on it. But before I get into the Yosemite wildlife, what I have been working on for 13 years of my life is building the world's largest wildlife crossing in LA. And I started working on it in 2012 and had no idea what it would turn into. I just had met with some biologists down there about P22. Again, I could do a whole talk on his story. How many have heard of P22, the famous mountain lion? And when I met with the biologist, who's now a good friend, I was like, well, how can I help? These urban mountain lions are really struggling. And he, in a very funny moment, was like, oh, there's this little wildlife crossing we need help with. And, okay, how hard can it be? Well, $100 million and 13 years later, it was hard, but it is underway. We did it. It is going to save this population of mountain lions from extinction. That is me with Governor Newsom. And next to him is Wallace Amberg, the lead donor, who put up $26 million to help get this to the finish line. Nobody's ever done anything like this before. Crossings are nothing new. Many of you might have seen them in other places in the country, but nobody was ever crazy enough to try to put it over one of the world's busiest freeways, and that's where I come in. This is a picture of construction. If you are driving in the LA area and are going on the 101 towards Ventura, you can't miss it. It is at the Agora Hills exit. And here's a nice video of some drone footage. This was actually taken last week. Not the right video. We were having trouble with sound, but anyway, you can see. There we go. You're seeing there's the waterproofing being put up on the deck. And soil's going to go in early next year. Got working with them. There we go. And the complete project will be done in 2026, but this is just such a monumental project. It is, mountain lions are the species most imminent risk in this area, but it is impacting all wildlife. This is being designed from monarch butterflies to mountain lions. It is a living habitat on top of the freeway. And to me, that is about as okay, so sorry, we had to my computer was not talking, so we're using the mic on the computer, but anyway, we should have soil up next year, and to me, this is the world's most hopeful construction project. We're going to be able to drive on the freeway, yet you'll have animals living and processing as well. And we are not stopping with one. I just started working with Governor Gavin Newsom, Secretary Wade Crowfoot, and these agencies to release California Wildlife Reconnected. We're going to build more crossings. Connectivity is the key to climate resilience and biodiversity, preventing this biodiversity collapse again. Connected landscapes are resilient landscapes for us too. So we've identified a bunch of projects, some in your area, that we're starting to work on. I've committed to raising $500 million in the next few years. I wish I got a commission, I do not. But I want to show you, before we get to Yosemite Wildlife, a quick video of some of the projects we've been looking at, and we'll recognize some landscapes here. We just finished a road trip around California, 2,500 miles, looking at crossing sites around here to see what's next. So here's a quick video. Turn on. I won't talk.
This initiative is trying to find ways to reconnect the landscape with underpasses and overpasses. It's an incredibly hopeful, amazing initiative. It's just been such a wonderful exploration of looking at not just the projects, but the amazing people behind them. So we bring together people from across different sectors, public, private, and all of the various disciplines that come together to make the wildlife crossing project happen. Engineering, planning, wildlife biology, ecology. Whether it be Yosemite Toad crossing in the High Sierra on 108, looking at an underpass from mountain lines in Santa Cruz, down to the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing that is underway and part of what we've been working on for so long, looking at building some crossings on the east side of the state for mule deer migration.
A lot of people don't realize the barriers we have put up for wildlife in giving them an opportunity for safe passage across these freeways and roads that we know.
We visit dozens of sites that need help with completion. There are proven solutions to this problem. It actually costs society more to do nothing than it costs to actually come in, build a structure, and fix this problem once and for all. So part of this wildlife crossing road trip and launching California Wildlife Reconnected, Governor Gavin Newsom, Secretary Wade Crowfoot, Director of Caltrans Tony Taveras, was to see how we can get them to the finish line. And one of the ways we're doing that is private funding. So we need your help, and these projects can get underway.
I always have to play that to the end because of the bears. But that's my day job. And it's really exciting. We are looking at a lot of crossing sites around the Yosemite area. How many have been on 108? Did you know you're driving over Yosemite Toad Crossing? It's pretty easy to see. There's fencing on the side and a couple of grates. That is an actual wildlife crossing. And one other site we're looking at, the possibility of doing that is a toad pass. The toads get smushed there too. But the east side of the Sierra, looking at mule deer crossings outside of Mammoth, some of the videos you saw there. So it's exciting that I just don't have to be in LA with wildlife crossings. I can be at home as well. So that was just a little bit about my day job in the Wallace-Annenberg crossing. But my real passion is Yosemite. It is my favorite place on earth. I am there every spare moment. I love it. I have since I first laid eyes on it. And I think I have a photo of that. And this was, though, when I was growing up in Massachusetts. I still have this book, and that is what I wrote when I was 12, listing all the parks I wanted to work with. And that came true. I worked in Yosemite for almost a decade. It was the Yosemite Association. I served as the vice president and CFO. Some of you might have known Steve Medley. And it was just incredible, incredible experience. And I still, again, make my home right outside the park. This is my first visit to Yosemite in 1992, 91. It was one of those really great days where it was a big snowstorm and the park closed, but I was already in and I had 4-wheel drive. And you don't often get Yosemite Valley to yourself. I did. Saw my first coyote and I was hooked. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, especially an East Coast girl. These landscapes were just so big. And just fell in love, and if I had one true love in life, it is Yosemite National Park. I wanted to start out this journey of wildlife, though, by telling you about a day I had in Yosemite. This was about 4 or 5 years ago now, I keep track. That I think just gets it why a lot of us, I'm guessing you all came tonight because you love wildlife, you probably had similar experiences. And I think it's experiences like this you can only get in these national parks that have preserved, you know, these kind of, unfortunately, these growing islands of protected space for wildlife. But it also brought me back to such an incredible time when really wildlife had primacy. Does anybody know this lake?
Middle Gaylor Lake.
Gaylor Lake, good job. It is one of my favorite basins of the park. I'm going to get into, but where I do my own like sort of personal research and where I spend my time when Stowe Pass opens is that time of the pass here. I love being above tree line. I'm going to talk about a lot of animals that I study who are alpine, in the alpine environment. And this basin to me is just one of my favorite places. So I try to get up there even before the road opens to survey Pika and see how they're doing in other wildlife. And this day, this was all within 30 minutes. This is what I call Pika Hill. I'm looking down, and that's a really good Pika site. So I see my Pika within maybe miles of my day. Pika are actually really social animals. I know they get a reputation for being hard to see, but if you sit still, they are very curious. Come out and say hello. So I see a Pika, which I usually do. I'm like, great. And then next up is bluebird. Wonderful. Here they are. Nest. I mean, I'm already thinking I'm winning, right? Wow. Bluebird sighting. Then I look up. I'm like, is that a bald eagle? Now, as you know, bald eagles are not, not real common in Yosemite. They're not unheard of, but bald eagles. So I'm like, please don't eat the pika, but as we can see, pika are way too smart for raptors. So I think at this point, I've hit the wildlife jackpot. Remember, this is all within 30 minutes. And I'm looking across the lake, and I'm like, what is that? Is that another person? Usually it's anybody this early, because you have to trap some snow cups and sun cups and everything. There's a coyote walking across the lake. Probably wanting spring. Walked all across the lake. So at this point, I'm thinking, wow, what an experience to see, the coyote walking across this frozen lake and welcoming. He goes away about 5 minutes later. I'm like, is that another coyote? He actually started walking right up the hill towards me. I'm like, I'm going to yield my seat to this bear. He can watch my cut, and I will give him some space. But I started out, and actually, my book, Yosemite Wildlife, which starts out with this story, because these are the type of experiences I think we all go to national parks to get, right? Connecting with wildlife as it should be. Connecting with wildlife in their homes. And this was just such a magical day. This is my backyard. That's about 100 feet from my house. This was in September. Mop Line and 2 of her kittens, which I watched grow up this year. And I just am always so full of gratitude for any sighting I get of any wildlife. And if you follow me on social media, as Bob knows, I post all my wildlife cameras. I just had a bear in my yard. I mean, it's just wonderful to know that we share our backyards with this incredible wildlife. So about Yosemite wildlife, these are, before I get into the wildlife, and I think most of you, how many hike in Yosemite? I mean, everybody here, right? So you probably know these landscapes, when I'm talking to people who haven't visited, but this is where I spend most of my time, because I'm very interested in wildlife and the alpine environments. And these are some of the most beautiful, and to me, ecologically significant places on the planet. Gaylor Lakes Basin, that is what I call Pika Hill. If you are hiking to Gaylor Lake and come across what either I call Gaylor Lake or Big Gaylor Lake, stop right there on that trail, sit, and the Pika will come out. This is the view from above the Granite Lakes. And this is a place I survey butterflies. On the ridge of the Gaylor Lakes Basin. And these landscapes in the alpine environment are just so incredible and unique, because although other places on the planet have alpine environments, we're the only one where it coincides with the Mediterranean climate. Very different influences on the flora and fauna than, say, a Rockies or Switzerland or something. You might see Mount Dana there in the background. You got the wildlife. I'd say my all-time favorite place on the planet is outside the park, which is the Dana Plateau. That is an incredible landscape. They think untouched, King Huber wrote, probably for the last 25 million years, by any major forces, since the last few ice ages missed it. It's too high. So when you're up there, it is an otherworldly place. There's Mount Dana, Glacier Canyon. And here's a little video of what it looks like. It is 2 miles wide. It is an incredible landscape. And you feel like you're on Mars. And you just get incredible views. But the wildlife up there, the rare butterflies, pika live up there. I've seen snowshoe hares. It's just an incredible place to wander in. Get some good views up there, you'll see. This is what I call the Garden of Rocks up there. And again, these are rocks that were not glaciated, but shaped over millions and millions of years. It's not Dana there, by water, wind, and time. And it is a magical place. So if you haven't been up there, it's a cross-country trip, but it's pretty easy to find. You really can't get lost.
What's the elevation of it?
You go from, the tip of it is 12,000 feet, so it's just 1,000 less than that. And then the other place I explore a lot is the Kuna Crest, which starts with Mammoth Peak, and there's the Kuna Lake. And there's Mount Gibbs in the background, but it's just such a lovely place. It's also where I see most of the bears and wild bears. These guys are, kind of hiding out, I think, from the park, because there's this Bingham Lake, a little creek bed, you see up there. So these for me, sharing the context, you'll see a lot of this wildlife, these beautiful alpine environments are in Yosemite House Home. So let's get to the wildlife, now that we've seen the beautiful scenery. So how many know Joseph Grinnell? Joseph Grinnell was an incredible scientist, and he and a lot of his colleagues, like Tracy Story, Mike Bergman, Joseph Dixon, really wanted to undertake a study of Yosemite wildlife. And we are so lucky they did, because most parks do not have a 100-year baseline for what was here. And they spent a lot of time on getting into the stats, not just writing a book, but took years surveying, doing an extensive survey, which turned into this book published in 1924 on Yosemite wildlife. It was the first book that really addressed the fauna. As this quote says, the reason they wrote it was, yes, everybody writes about the beautiful scenery in Half Dome, but nobody's writing about the wildlife. And so they did that in 1924. This was the transect they did that this book is over 700 pages, 957 days of field work, 2,000 pages of field notes, and 817 pages. I'm happy to report I've actually topped that, except for the specimen. The one thing I don't like they did is they killed everything they saw and brought it back to the museum. We don't do that now. But I've actually, not that I was trying to compete, but it's, definitely exceeded these numbers. But the scientific rigor and the storytelling which they combine in this book is incredible. And the reason why this is so important is because we have photos like this that show us the climatic conditions at certain times. We also have, obviously, what the wildlife, what they were doing, how many there were. And this is very, very important. This is a copy of the book, one of my most prized possessions. Just a beautiful book. Yeah, there's some of the dead animals. But this becomes really important, especially in the age we're living in, which is trying to gauge how, I'll tell you, in the environmental field or conservation field anymore, it's no longer how to prevent climate change. It's how to triage life that's here from it. Game over now. It's happening. As we all know up here, whether it's, how many times have you had to evacuate? 83 times. The record heat this summer. It's now how do we triage? We're in the emergency room now, especially with wildlife that doesn't have the options we have to turn the air conditioning or leave when there's a fire. So we have these baselines to try to figure out, like these photos taken when the book was published and then 100 years later, to try to figure out what is going on and this is what I do when I'm surveying. This will be a kind of a fun video for you guys. This is I didn't get a 2024 in here yet, but I take the same picture every time I survey a Gale Lake, and here's the snow conditions. As far back as I've been doing this. And you can see the big swings from year to year, which again, isn't necessarily abnormal, but these swings are getting bigger. And again, if you're a wild animal, swings are what you can't adapt to. But it's amazing to see that. Most of these were in years of great drought, so you don't see the snow melting out quicker. But interestingly, you know, the snowpack is not always, how much you have left in the spring is not always dictated by the snowpack size. It's a lot of other factors. You know, when the snow fell, what are the water content, things like that. So you can see the big swings at Gale Lake. This is the winter, the spring of 2023. I think none of us will forget it. The most snow ever in the Sierra. And I had to work to see those pika early. Those sun cups were literally up to here for miles. I didn't see them. So, as Grinnell said, you know, this information is going to be really important for years from now. And so when I started going to Yosemite and researching Grinnell and the wildlife, I wanted to write that next book on wildlife. Surely I thought there was another book on Yosemite wildlife that had been written since 1924. Nope. Again, everybody writes about Half Dome, takes the pretty photos, but I want people to see Half Dome as something. So that became my quest to write the updated Grinnell. They had already resurveyed, and obviously I've done my own field study, but what was missing was the book. Here it is. Now that cover's not final, won't tell them the publisher. But I reached out to Rob, I was a few years into really seriously doing it, and said, you know, instead of getting stock photos, I'd love to partner with a photographer. And he's like, yes. I had written a section for his book, and the Yosemite Conservancy agreed, and it's going to be a fabulous book. All photos, well, most photos taken by Rob. He spent years getting them. I think it's going to be about 350 pages to be out in September. Lots of great storytelling, but also lots of really great, great science in there as well. And for me, that's what I see myself as, the animal storytellers, because I love Obie Kaufman's quotes. Animals are storytellers if we just listen and take the time to get to know them. So like Grinnell did, a lot of the science he pairs with stories. There are some fascinating stories in his book, Animal Life in Yosemite, and that's what we try to do here. So some of the animals you're going to learn about. How many have heard of the mountain lion salamander? Yeah, Bob, is that because you followed me on Facebook, or did you know that? I didn't know about this animal until I started researching this book. This is an amazing animal. This was one of the premier discoveries. Think about this, a little salamander. Grinnell and his team was like, this is the best thing we found in 3 years of surveying. So they were trying to trap small mammals right at the base of the glacier on Lyell. And they trapped these salamanders. Like, what are these guys doing up here? This is an alpine, subalpine environment. And they just couldn't figure out, they were just so out of place. These animals, salamanders, are geared towards climbing. So they actually live, they are down at lower elevations, like you can find them in Yosemite Valley. They have a stubbed tail that they use as a walking stick. They are just really adapted towards climbing. They live on Half Dome. In fact, there was some early literature about limiting hikers up there because it's habitat for them. And then one of their adaptations, if they are confronted either with a predator or a rock slide, is to roll into a ball and roll down the hill. Now, I could pay $300 and get the rights to use a video of that rolling down the hill, but instead, just Google it and you can see the little salamander rolling in the ball. This also became what they call a biogeographical mystery because one of the salamanders, the type of salamander that they are, you really have to go to Europe to find a comparable species. We do have a few in California. In fact, the other rare species is where I live, in the Riceburg 140 corridor at the Merced River, is an endangered salamander related to this as well, limestone salamander. So it's still scientists to this day don't get how you relate They only occur in Europe and in this really special place in California, but it's pretty amazing. They are a really cool species. And this was, as they started finding these in different places, again, below Glacier Point, you can see them again. They like rocky, moist areas, but aren't afraid of high altitudes. So, pretty cool animal to uncover. Here, one of the things, two things I should mention that, again, we have that other parks don't, which just makes Yosemite such a great test place for wildlife and how you compare wildlife over time. We have Grinnell Survey, and we have Yosemite Nature Notes. Yosemite Nature Notes was started in the early 20s and continued up until the 60s. Then Yosemite Association in the 70s kind of picked it up a little bit. Steve Medley, my late boss, turned it into the Yosemite Journal. And I think the last issue was 2010. But you have this incredible record of wildlife for decades. So that's another baseline we have. And we have these wildlife observation cards that nobody, like when I was researching this book, I didn't know we had. Why does nobody know about these? And there's some historical figures in these observation cards stored away in archives that are pretty amazing. So we have this incredible body of research that is just sitting in our archives that, to me, it's just so wonderful to be able to tell some of these stories. Okay, if you didn't find the salamander cute, I can't imagine you'd have to have a cold heart not to love this little critter. Look at that guy. I will try to race through these because I could do a whole talk on pica. They're so cute. I remember seeing my first pica and I wasn't quite sure what I was seeing. Pica had actually run over my foot and I was like, what is that little guy? And just immediately fell in love. I mean, they are just one of the most amazing and intrepid animals I can think of. As Grinnell details here in his book, they actually howl at the moon. So, I mean, how can you not love that? I am the, I just observed pica over a year. I have over, at this point, probably 5,000. That's an old screenshot of some of my photos. And I've really gotten to know them. They've become, I would say, friends. I actually named some of them. And they live sometimes 3 to 5 years. Sometimes they don't live as long. But they also happen to be an extremely hard animal to see. Can anybody see the pikas? Yeah. Talk about adapted to their environment, right? They're also extremely fast. They are like rockets. And I should mention this at the beginning, Rob actually is on the east side of Zero B here. Most of the photos in this are mine, which are not very good. His photos are also credited, but will become quite apparent. We haven't had final photo selection for the book yet, but when we do, I'll start using a lot of his photos. But they are extremely fast. Watch this. This is two pica kind of haunting each other here. I call it pica zoomies. And like it's even hard to hold the camera. There's like little rockets. They are, it's actually, yeah, a lot of people think they're rodents. They're not. They are ladymorphs, or they're in the bunny family. I call them potato bunnies. Yeah. But they're really incredible little creatures. Here's one. As I said, they get the reputation for being hard to see, but if you are still for a bit and pretend you're not a weasel, they'll come out and say hi. This is actually Sophie, a pica for 3 years that was there. And they have their own territories. And she come out and eat lunch with me. Look at that cute little critter. They also are really cute, the noise they make. You hear that? No. It's a bleep. Yeah, sorry, the speakers aren't working well. But you can Google pica noises. Very cool. Pica have different dialects, so Rocky Mountain pica is going to sound different than a Sierra pica. But I will say I hear different dialects, like the Gamble Lakes pica are different than the Dane Plateau. So they definitely have some different accents. Even their butts are cute. Look at that. Little pajama bottom feet. Oh, look at that little pica butt. How can you not fall in love with this guy? Their poop is even adorable. Their poop is actually really interesting in that they They will poop multiple times. There's a name for that, I'm forgetting. And some of this stuff is so old, they're able to carbon date it and get interesting information about the environment. So yeah, even their poop's pretty cute. Here's a pike latrine that probably goes back decades. And then, you know, this is a rock photo. You see, doesn't that not just pop? And he's got the camera, he's got the talent. And, you know, the reason they're doing this, pika don't hibernate. You know, put another check mark for why they're so badass. They do not hibernate. They live under the snow all winter in what they call the subnivean zone, the space between the snow. And what they eat is they gather vegetation all summer and put it in hay piles, and then when the snow falls, buries it. That's what they nibble on. And their pantries are highly individualistic. They actually will gather, you know, they have tastes, much like if I went to your pantries, right? They'd all be different. It's pretty impressive what they do. And I will just add, one of the reasons the pike is so vulnerable to climate change, you've probably heard, you know, the typical they don't like the heat. So as it gets hotter in the summer, not good for them, but also the vegetation problems aren't good. The big thing for the pika is if we, you know, the predictions for the Sierra is we're not going to have much of a snowpack. 90% reductions in the snowpack. They need that snowpack in the winter for insulation, or else they're not going to make it through the winter. So that's one of the biggest threats with climate to the pika. But, you know, gathering their food, there's one, and they will gather huge bouquets, much bigger than they are. And they will do that hundreds of times a time. So that's why if you can just look at a pika's root and sit there, they'll go back and forth, back and forth. Here's an example of one of their hay piles. There's a rock photo. And this is what they call their kingly throne. So pika, pika like rocks like this that are slanted upward triangle, and they sit on their thrones. And then if a predator comes or they get startled, they can back off. So if you want to see pika, look for those angled rocks. There's another of Rob's photos. And here's Half Dome, again with climate, pika are moving up slope. They used to be pika on Half Dome, but it's a little below the range at this point. Okay, this is another one of my favorites. A toad on snow. Who would have thought, right? But we have another incredible animal only found in the Sierra, like the Lyle salamander, called the Yosemite toad. Who's seen one here? All right, guys. When summer comes, when spring comes, you have to rush up to Pleasant Pass. You might be lucky enough to hear the Yosemite toad. I have some calls. But this animal we don't know a lot about, except for in the spring, for a couple weeks, comes out to breed, and I'll show you some photos, and it disappears. High elevation toad lives in some of the, you know, a really hard environment. And again, I love, Grinnell and Storer did not give top marks to megafauna. Their top two finds of their survey was the Mount Lyell salamander and the Yosemite toad. That's awesome. This is a Yosemite toad I encountered, and you have to work for these videos because, again, if you're up at the Gala Lakes Basin with this snow, there's no trail. You are trudging through snow. But this frog, this toad, thought I was a suitable date. Nice to be picked up on, even by a toad. But look at what these guys do. They're walking over snow. They walk up to a mile over snow sometimes to make it to their breeding grounds. And I want you to think about how cold this water is about to change. So this is lower Gala Lake. There's still a lot of snow. Still pretty cold down there. He's like, I see you. I'm coming. Are you a date? You're pretty big, but who cares? I know. Think about this. This is an amphibian, and they're able to tolerate this cold, which I put my hand in. I was like, no, you wouldn't get me in there, even for a date. Even for Brad Pitt, I wouldn't. And here, so here's a close-up that Rob took of the Yosemite toad. They're beautiful creatures, and if I can get, hopefully this can work, because we want to get this. That's what they sound like. Imagine hundreds of them. I thought it was a bird. Here they are mating. Sometimes they get a little overwhelmed and imagine your dating life as well. So this is another remarkable creature that we have only in the Sierra. And a really good place to hear that chorus is if Sonora Pass opens early enough. Get up there, go to where that little crossing is, and stand there, and it is resounding. You can't even hear the cars over that trail. It's pretty cool. I think I have time for a couple more animals, and we'll take some questions. Alpine butterflies are one of my favorite that I study. I actually have a whole chapter on alpine butterflies in the book. Because we think of butterflies as in our backyards. Those are two swallowtails. That is white mountain Kness. You don't see Kness in the grade. But there's over 60 species that live either part-time or all the time in the alpine environment. It's amazing. I mean, I just did not think about that until I started coming to Yosemite and seeing them when I was climbing those peaks. And these swallowtail, you can probably see them down at your elevation. But these guys hilltop on high mountains. They actually, much like a megafauna species would, have a territory and defend it for up to a month. Here is a butterfly. This is again on the ridge of the Deer Lake Basin. And I'm going to pan up a minute. You can see the type of environments. These guys are flying up to 12, 13,000 feet and defending their territory. There's a nest. I mean, I have a hard enough time getting up there. Imagine you're a butterfly, right? Stick to some of these. But the coolest butterfly in the alpine environment is just Arctic. Talk about camouflage, right? Again, this species you can only find in the Sierra, although you do find some other species, some species that last in other places. But they literally almost never alight on flowers, except for when obviously they're breeding and eating a little bit. But they literally stay on the rocks. That's the first one I ever saw. That was the Dana Plateau. I don't know how I saw it. Like, that's a butterfly? But they're pretty amazing birds. Checker spots, again, you have at your low elevations, but that's the Eve's checker spots, which is common at least in the riceberg. I'm not area not as knowledgeable about the ones here. This is the Dana Plateau. These guys are flying up to 12,000 feet and over snow. Isn't that amazing? Sierra Nevada checker spot, again, is a species we have here that's a little rarer. And then another butterfly you can only find in the Tomato Pass here. It is the most restricted range of all North American butterflies. It's the Sierra sulphur. Beautiful butterfly. If you're in the Gale Lake Basin, you will see it in the spring. This is a more common butterfly that greets the spring, the lustrous copper. I mean, look at that violet orange. Carnassians, we have the Clubus, we have a rare one, the Sierra Nevada. This is a really common butterfly that migrates through, although I will say I have not seen a lot of migrations the past 6-7 years, which worries me. But here they are flying over the Dana Plateau years ago. I was up there. Again, I have a hard enough time getting up there. Sierra Blue is one of our, that's Rob's photo, look at that. Is that enough? And then I'm going to skip, because we are kind of out of time, but I wanted to, actually I do want to tell the story a little. One of the things I covered, a lot of us are familiar with mule deer. I have a whole chapter on migrating mule deer in the Sierra. But one of the things I uncovered in my research was Old Horny in Yosemite Nature Notes. This is such a great story. Old Horny literally had 3 antlers. That was not just a growth thing. He shed that antler there like he did the other 2. He was a favorite in Yosemite Valley, and he died. Yosemite Nature Notes detailed all this. And so I read this story. There were a few stories in Nature Notes, and the last story said, Old Horny, and that's when you could name Buck Old Horny, he should not, be lost to history. We will put him in the museum. So I'm like, oh my God, is he in the museum? So I go down to the museum. They don't have him. I get into the archives. I'm like, do you know where Old Horny is? And looking up, Greg's like, who? He looks it up, nothing, but we walked through the warehouse, and there on the top shelf, this tag had been lost, was the antlers. So Old Horny still exists, but what a great story. I'm just going to skip to a few notable sightings these days that I want to talk about real quickly, and then we'll get to questions. So the Sierra Nevada red fox, one of the things I really love is the wildlife is starting to come back. We've done our best to banish and exterminate them, but the Sierra Nevada red fox is a really rare and endemic species here that is down to just a few dozen individuals, and like Yosemite had its first sighting in 100 years in 2014. These are not like your usual foxes. They have special adaptations to live in the high country, and it's just such I'm just full of wonder that they're back. Wolverine. They just had 3 sightings of this wolverine. Was it last summer? That was in Yosemite, and the other 2 sightings were really from the ski lift or at Mammoth. So we had Buddy the Wolverine in the Sierra in 2018, and nobody quite knew what happened to them. But these were the first wolverine, again, in decades in the park. So I'll tell you, that is like my most wanted sight to be out there and see a wolverine. They are pretty amazing animals. This is one of my favorite birds, the gray-crowned rosy finch. They are high elevation birds that literally live there all winter, are quite comfortable in freezing, horrible snow environments that we would hate, but they feed in the winter on insects blown up to the glaciers from below that die or are frozen, and they go and pick them off like a buffet. So they have a really interesting adaptation that allows them not to migrate. The Sierra Newt I'll skip because I will just go off. I love newts, they're adorable, but I think one point I like to make in these talks is they're having a hard time, especially in mountain biking. Listen, I love mountain biking, but as we do more and more trails and allow more and more mountain biking off trail or these single track trails, these guys are getting nailed as well as other small animals. It's not that we can't mountain bike and do things like that, we just need to be a little more careful about how we site trails because they're having a but a couple other things, and I'll get to questions. Oh, you want to see the peregrines? All right. Yeah, peregrines are an incredible success story. That is a James McGrew photo. It's one of the few photos in the book's not raw. Peregrines, of course, with DDT, were on their way out. Kind of incredible. They were one of the first success stories with the Endangered Species Act. In Yosemite was ground zero for bringing them back because of the protected space. Little known fact, and I got to interview Yvonne Chenard for the book in Patagonia. He and other rock climbers were instrumental in bringing these guys back because they could bring captive breeding peregrines back up to the nest because they nest on the cliffs. And this was also, I will give away kind of one of the fun parts about interviewing Yvonne, who's a great guy, is that the reason we have Patagonia today is because of wildlife. Yvonne Chenard started rock climbing because in high school he was secretary of his falconry club. He loved falcons. So he started rock climbing so he could go where the falcons are. Hence we have Patagonia as the company today because of the love of wildlife. The American Dipper. Does it called the American Dipper? Love to go in. This is a lot more simple. These guys are ducks who aren't ducks. Yeah. Woo! Walking right up. Fairy shrimp, I'll save the story for the book, but an incredible little invertebrate we have in the high country and elsewhere. The Yosemite studio scorpion, pretty incredible. I don't have, the other animal I wanted to talk about was, I saw a burrowing owl at 11,000. It was an incredible find. I was standing there, like, what are you doing up here? I thought I was hallucinating. Like, I didn't drink that much last night. It's pretty rare to see them up there, but not unheard of. It's really
What kind of owl?
burrowing owl, 11,000 feet. There are 2 records I was able to uncover, one on the Dana Plateau in the 50s, but it's not common. It's not even common to see them anywhere up here, right? Yosemite has almost no records on our naturalists. I talked to Sarah Stock, and she's like, wow, that is, I really thought I was hallucinating. No, that is a burrowing owl. And then this is another species that was discovered what is this, 20, the date's right, but in the last decade, it's about the size of your thumbnail, and they found it in some of the talus caves in Yosemite, and it's a pretty rare finding, and I think there's more species of this type. So anyway, these are just some of the stories, and we'll end with some marmot babies I saw on Titan Hill that are in the book. You know, within 45 minutes, I tried to squeeze in as much as I could, but if you follow me on social media, you'll see many more stories. And please reach out with my email, and everything is here. Stay in touch. Happy to answer you some of your wildlife questions. And I know once the book is out, it'll be out next fall, Rob and I will be on the road with more stories, but his photos were too much better than mine. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to take some questions. Questions? Yes?
So how do you get the animals to go to the crossing?
That's a really good question. We put up a sign that says this way. Yeah, actually, you know, what's great is wildlife crossings are nothing new. We're kind of inventing some science because we're doing it in an urban area. We have to do soundproofing, lightproofing, something a rural animal doesn't. But we know how the animals find them. And I'll tell you, the biggest way they find them is themselves. They are incredibly smart. Word really does get out in the animal world, right? Hey, crossing that way. Some crossings do take longer for them to find, but once they do, it becomes teaching, much like we teach our kids where to cross the street. Some of you might have seen, it was friends of mine, the famous badger and coyote video, where the badger, just Google it, badger and coyote are teaching each other to use this culvert. But having said that, you don't leave it to chance. So one of the things we know from decades of wildlife crossing science is that exclusionary fencing is key. So you put with a lot of these crossings, and for our crossing, there'll be 2 miles of fencing on either side of the crossing that eliminates their options. It basically funnels them to that point, and that works in a lot of areas. The other thing we do to help animals find it is landscaping. Animals are like us. They don't want to go straight up a slope, right? They want to follow the gradual paths. So a lot of the vegetation and landscaping helps them as well. But I'll tell you, these crossings, when put up, have up to 97% success rates. These animals do not want to cross our roads. And I don't blame them. I've stood on that 101 at 2 a.m. and you couldn't pay me $1 million to cross that road. Because that dangerous. So, good question. Oh, wolves, yeah, I thought I had a slide for wolves. I must have cut it, but I am very excited about wolves. In 2011, remember OR7? OR7 crossed into California in 2011. He was the first wolf in 100 years, and who knew? And I worked in Yellowstone National Park for 4 years. I worked with Doug Smith on the Wolf Project, great guy. Who knew when they introduced wolves in 1995 to Yellowstone that would mean wolves would repopulate California? Those wolves are direct descendants of the Yellowstone wolves, and they made it here on their own. But when OR7 crossed in, I'm on record, on video, saying we will have wolves in the Sierra in 10 years, and I was right. There are wolves in the Sierra now. We just celebrated that. We have a wolf pack in the Sierra National Forest, and I will tell you, they are here. You know, they're not tracking even 10% of the wolves that are there. We had a wolf that made it to almost to LA, or 93, came from here, it was 15 miles from my house. So get ready, Yosemite Valley will be back. That's just so remarkable. And it's a testament to the resiliency of wild things that they made it here on their own. So, really remarkable. Yes?
The different styles of crossings, the above ground, underground. They just did some over on 395 for the migrating deer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know about that?
I do, yeah, absolutely. Those are underpasses, right? So yeah, there are different styles of crossings. Underpasses, overpasses, it all depends on the geography, all depends on the species. Vegetated overpasses like the ones we're building are the most whole-scale solutions where almost all wildlife species would use it. Underpasses work too though, but dark, narrow underpasses, a lot of prey species like deer will use. But those, and you have to have enough fill on the road to be able to do open overpasses like underpasses like they did there where the deer will use. So that was a great solution. Katie Rodriguez, who you saw in that video, the Mammoth project that I'm helping with, 395, it's going to be a series of under and one or two overpasses. She's the one that spearheaded those two. Those are great. Yeah, really exciting. 395 for migrating deer is, I mean, there are so many vehicle spots there, so it's really exciting to see the improvements start.
Is there some kind of mountain goat or mountain sheep up in Yosemite?
So we have Sierra Nevada bighorn in Yosemite, although that is a really interesting animal that we're, it's what I call a conservation conundrum, in that they were hunted out of the park extinction. They started, but they were in other areas of the Sierra in really small numbers. They started bringing them back. I think the first herd in Levi Canyon, I think it was the 70s. They start they reintroduced them, I was in 2015 to the cathedral range of the park, and they're really struggling. One of the things that is really impacting them is big snow. I think about half the herd got taken out with that 2023 snow. Another is mountain lions. And I'm the biggest advocate for mountain lions you'll find, and it's not the mountain lions' fault. They're in such low numbers that one predation takes out, can be really impactful. So, what do? Mountain lions belong here. You start messing with the Sierra Nevada mountain lion population, which is the most genetically healthy in the entire state. You then create another problem. But you want the Sierra Nevada. I'll tell you the solution I say in my book, so I'll give it away. When the wolves come back, that's going to help. Mountain lions actually wolves will displace, kind of keep, again, we ruin we messed the balance up, right? So I call it the Humpty Dumpty. It's not so easy to put it back together again. So, but yeah, there are bighorn, there's the Mount Tom herd. I probably don't have these numbers right, but I hope someday we see more of a robust herd in Yosemite, but I'll tell you, it's not going to be easy. I don't have a magic solution. But we do not have mountain goats. Unless somebody sets some loose, I would not rule out. We had in our LA study, one of the researchers who happened to follow big cats of the world found a tiger print. And we're like, what? And it turned out, yes, there was a tiger somebody's pet. So, you never know. I wouldn't rule it out.
What keeps the mountain lion population in check? Is it just lack of food? Or?
I'll tell you the thing that keeps it in check is they do not share territory. Why you will never see an overpopulation of mountain lions. Mountain lions are solitary creatures. They have enormous territory needs, so 100, 150 square miles for a male. And it depends on prey density. Males will fight to the death over territory. So that's why when people talk about it, mountain lions are increasing or overpopulation. Not really. Once Prop 117 was passed in 1990 protecting mountain lions here, of course at that point the population probably increased and stabilized after hunting was eliminated. But after that, they've been pretty stable because they will fight to the death over their own territory. They also are not like coyotes and bears and animals that have really adapted to our lifestyle in our places. They don't eat our food, right? They're never going to be in our garbage cans. They want mule deer. So mountain lions are actually the best stabilizer of their own. You're just never going to see them share space or overpopulate.
So are the females the same way? They have their own?
Yeah, so a male will typically have a few females in their territory. Females are a little better not fighting to the death, but they're pretty solitary as well. So you'll have a little more overlap with females, but not much. And if you see a bunch of mountain lions together, it's probably what you saw. They don't disperse. Mountain lion youngsters don't disperse till they're about 1 or 2. So a mother can have a few of her youngsters that look as big as her. Again, they typically just are not social creatures. They're the introverts of the animal world. They don't want anything to do with each other. Mountain lion fathers are deadbeat dads. They have 1-night stands, 2-night stands with female, and that's it. They do not have anything to do with their kids. So yeah, they're interesting. When you look at wildlife and how they adapt to the age they're living in, mountain lion is a really interesting creature because unlike coyotes, which have expanded their range, you guys know that? I mean, coyotes really were a southwest animal. They were not north. They were not east of the Mississippi. they're almost up to the Arctic. We were talking about this over dinner. But mountain lions are not one that are exploiting, our environments like bears, coyotes, raccoons. It's interesting, but they're holdover from the Ice Age. They are the only, they used to be prey to the American lion, which is big lions, saber-toothed cats, the giant bears. Those all went extinct in the last Ice Age. They now, talk about a big power flip, right? They now are the dominant carnivores before they weren't. So they were the only ones to survive sort of that sort of megafauna age, and they were sort of the tiniest of the megafauna.
So we had a female in the cub that came through at the beginning of the summer. How long does it take for them to kind of cover their territory?
Yeah, that's the other thing. They typically, if a mountain lion's in your yard, the next day they could be 25 miles away. So here's how mountain lions behave. They will kill a deer. A deer is what they really want, although they will take out smaller animals. And they stay on that about a week, right? And my dad will tell you, they had a mountain lion that killed a deer in their yard and came up to their bird bath every night for 5 nights and drank out of it, and then moved on. And then, so they will follow the prey. So kill a deer, feed on it, and then they'll kind of wander to when they take down the next deer. Could be a block away, could be 25 miles. They can travel up to 25 miles in a day. Where they will hang around, and this is why it's our responsibility. Listen, I have dogs, cats, you name it. I protect them. You have livestock. Mountain lions mostly hunt at night. Think about it. Mountain lions and wolves, we think hunting is easy. No, they're successful like maybe 10, 20% of the time. So if they come upon a fenced area of sheep or goats, unprotected, who can't get away, we all have cats. What's going to happen? Bingo, easy meal. So that's why, where they might stick around is if you have an In-N-Out burger that you've made for them where they can make easy takeout, much easier than taking out a deer. But for the most part, naturally, if they kill a deer, go 10 miles. They rove their entire territory and kind of wander it. And they do kind of have regular shifts. Those mountain lions that see my yard, I pick them up about once every 6 months. So they kind of do have like a regular route sometimes. And please call me if you have coexistence issues. Again, happy to help. Like I can how to protect your pets, livestock, because really, as we all know, if we don't help them be successful, it's usually the wildlife that are gonna. And I think we all know about it.
Say something about the 2 SoCal populations and why that crossing is so important.
Oh yeah, and this relates to why the Sierra Nevada population of mountain lions is so important. The reason the mountain lions threaten Southern California, and if you, I don't know how familiar you guys are with LA, a lot of people don't want to be familiar with it. And I was the most LA hater before working down there. Now I love it. They make room for a mountain lion, great. South of the 101, you have kind of, there's the Pacific Ocean, then you have this mountain range, the Santa Monica Mountains, totally encased by the 101 when they put in. So the first time in its evolutionary history, cut off the rest of the world. As the famous saying is, islands are where species go to die. You don't like islands, right? So this mountain lion population south of the 101, once that road starts becoming trafficked, plenty of open space down there if you've been down there. LA has more open space if you haven't been down there than you can imagine. But these mountain lions can't get out. The 101 is 300 to 400,000 cars a day. They are trapped, okay? Mountain lions from the north can't get in. So you have this isolated population that is inbreeding themselves out of existence. Literally, the scientific research showed they had the lowest genetic diversity outside of the Florida panther. Florida panther is just another name for mountain lion. And those guys did almost go extinct. Scientists published this paper in 2016 showing this genetic. He said, hey, next up, we're worried they're going to start showing birth defects. That showed up, birth defects in 2020. Came tail, one descended test beat, low sperm counts. They might think they can still live, but the next step is sterility. You're not even going to be able to breathe. So these guys are, it's like, these guys have Tinder. Imagine if you're on Tinder and all you're seeing is your family members as options. So really, my job was to make sure these cougars had dates outside their family. And that's what the crossing will do. It's not, it's not going to bring more cougars down there. It's actually just going to be kind of the SCAG team. Hey, I'm going up north, I'm coming down south. And the modeling shows that's all it's going to take is movement. But you see that up here too, our roads. If you want to do a deep dive into this, it's a great book out called Crossings by Ben Goldfarb. I'm not saying it's a great book just because I'm in it and there's a whole chapter on our project. It shows you the absolute devastation our roadways have caused to wildlife around the world. And we don't think about it, but roadkill, the moral cost of driving on wildlife, and us, 4,000 people a year just in California die on our roads. And I love driving, don't get me wrong. If that was anything else, it'd be a public health crisis, right? We just are okay with a transportation that has such an impact on both human and wildlife, and that's why these crossings are at least one thing we can fix. And I love it because a lot of environmental solutions are really hard to figure out what to do. Crossings work. And it's going to work with these mountain lions. And they will then, again, get dates outside their family.
So the picture that you showed about, that was the Santa Monica Mountains where they were breaking ground?
Yeah, it's the Santa Monica Mountains.
There's just one, or there's going to be multiple?
There's going to be multiple. That is, by any scientific measure, the biggest barrier to connectivity. They've been studying that area for over 30 years. But there's more. We are looking at, it sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit of LA freeways, but we're looking at crossings. The 15, the 126, the 118, the 405. I mean, literally, you can throw a rock in even some of the secondary roads. And what I didn't say about the genetics is, there's many effects to the lack of connectivity for animals. One is they get hit by a car. Terrible. It's suffering. You don't want it to happen. Two is genetic isolation. And the same National Park Service research that showed the mountain lion genetic isolation is showing that is also happening in western fence lizards and red-tits. Right, the little guys are also becoming genetically isolated, although there's more of them than they are in this territory need. But then you get into other impacts of the lack of connectivity that can really impact wildlife. And I think all of us are familiar with fire here, right? Oh, I know I am. So think about this. You're a mountain lion trying to get away from a fire. This is kind of analogous to like the poor people in paradise who couldn't get out, right? So we had the Woolsey fire was the fire down there that took out 50% of the open space in the Santa Monica Mountains. So think about that. A, you just had half of your territory cut that has no prey base. And you don't have any options except to move into an LA suburb. But we had one mountain lion in the Woolsey fire that got burned to death. He was like people can be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Otherwise, mountain lions have a pretty good adaptation like we do with fire. Get the hell out of there. They can usually, unless they're at ground zero like this poor cat, P78, can get out of there. But P64 was able to escape the fire, but couldn't get out of the fire zone because of the roads. And they know this from its GPS points. And ended up starving to death with burnt paws 2 weeks later because he couldn't get out of the burnt fire zone. So that's, again, when you start thinking about the lack of connectivity for these wildlife, it plays out in ways we don't think. And then I'll also end with making you think about connectivity with not just roads, lights. Light pollution is so disruptive to animals. Migrating birds, bats, deer. Our eyes are not like deer's eyes. A lot of these animals, they get direct light in their eyes, they can't recover. It takes them sometimes 45 minutes. So even if you're a land animal, insects, everything. Light pollution is a barrier to connectivity. Sound, right? Just the mere presence. Fencing in your yard. Start thinking about your yard from an animal's eyes. If an animal, suddenly a new fence, like Bob, you and Laurie were telling me, we used to see these animals in our yard. I forget what animal. I said, well, did your neighbor put up a fence that maybe, barred them? Are you using rat poisons in your yard? There are so many things that are barriers to connectivity aside from roads that really are impactful to wildlife. So, you can start thinking about it a little differently. But obviously roads are the most barriers. Yeah.
So, since the wolves have made it back to California, do you expect the grizzly bear to get back to California? It's on our flag.
I hope so. I can tell you, I loosely consult on an effort to bring them back. I don't know. It's going to be a heavy lift. Obviously, I don't think everybody's going to embrace that with open arms. But I would love it. I think, that's the last remaining kind of predator that we have lost here. And interestingly enough, they help, obviously black bears as much have moved into grizzly habitat. Obviously, we're having these coexistence issues with them, which again, it's our issue, but still, bears are in more populated numbers than, or in areas they weren't. The grizzly, again, they help bring back that balance because, grizzlies will kill a black bear. So, I think, again, we kind of messed up this balance pulling these predators out of the landscape. So, to help with some of the issues we created, bringing them back, maybe. So yeah, there is a movement afoot to do that. Like I said, they're on the flag. There's a little section about it in my book, and you're going to get into it. Grizzly Adams, we all watched that. I didn't know this until researching the book. Ben was from Yosemite. He was a real bear captured from Yosemite, and that's where the story that the popular TV show was based on. Yeah, sorry. Myself included. I mean, I drive a car. All right, well, I just want to thank you. Please, you have my email, reach out. Thanks for listening to my story.